Well, in what comes as a huge setback for the BCCI, the Supreme Court appointed Lodha panel has asked the Apex Court to remove the BCCI top brass and appoint ex-Home Secretary GK Pillai as an observer. The move comes after BCCI continued resistance to reforms. So this is a big move as far as, a big recommendation as far as the Lodha panel is concerned. Now they want the entire top brass of the BCCI to be removed and GK Pillai, former Home Secretary, to be put there as an observer. Remember, there has been a constant battle there going on between the BCCI and the Lodha panel. They have been on loggerheads. Shobit, my colleague, joining me from the newsroom. Shobit, you know, the news of Lodha panel and the BCCI at loggerheads has been a continuous news, but how do we see this? This is a very strong recommendation.
Oh, Ankit, you're absolutely right. This is, in fact, possibly the biggest development in the entire scenario so far. Lodha panel for the first time has asked the Supreme Court to dismiss the BCCI top brass. Now we are still awaiting further details, but the top brass certainly involves the BCCI President Anurag Thakur, Secretary Ajay Shirke. Now remember, these two gentlemen had to submit affidavits in front of the Lodha panel after Supreme Court asked the BCCI to accept reforms. This entire saga is continuing because BCCI has so far refused to accept reforms which the Lodha panel had asked the BCCI to adopt. Now remember, Lodha panel has been appointed by the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court then passed a verdict asking BCCI to adopt these reforms. The board has so far not done it. The BCCI continues to blame the state associations that they are the ones who are not accepting it. So this entire saga continues, and now, for the final time, Lodha panel has asked Supreme Court to dismiss the BCCI top brass and appoint an observer.
Of course, you know, Shobit, it's too early. I mean, of course, this must be sinking in as far as the top brass of the BCCI is concerned. Most of them, you know, seasoned politicians, they are going to react to that. But, you know, before that, if Supreme Court does, you know, uphold or does ask them to do exactly what the Lodha panel is saying, this would mean a big setback for the politicians and those who have been ruling BCCI so far.
Absolutely. BCCI is called a cozy club for this reason, because politicians continue to rule Indian cricket, and fans and ex-cricketers have been asking for more cricketers to be present in BCCI administration. First of all, however, the BCCI top brass, current top brass, need to accept the reforms which the Supreme Court has ordered them to do. They haven't done it. Now, BCCI's tactic has been to blame the various state associations that the BCCI president says that he does not have any voting rights, so he cannot influence the state associations. So far, only 3 state associations have accepted the reforms, Hyderabad being the latest one. Tripura has also done it along with Vidarbha. But other state associations continue to oppose these reforms. However, because it was a Supreme Court order, this could be seen as a contempt of court. We don't know that yet. However, in a very strongly worded request to the Supreme Court, the Lodha panel has said that enough is enough. The BCCI top brass and appoint an observer. Now, remember, Supreme Court has done it in the past. Justice Mukul Mudgal was appointed as an observer to oversee the functioning of the Delhi Cricket Association, and so Supreme Court has taken this step in the past with the state association. Yes. Will they do it with the BCCI? Remains to be seen. You
know, Shobit, I also wanted to understand from you, you have spoken to Justice Lodha as well many times. What was the reason? Okay, Boria Majumdar is also joining us. Shobit, I'll just come back to you. Boria, this is a big recommendation as far as the entire functioning of the BCCI is concerned. Lodha panel wants the top brass of the BCCI removed.
Yeah, this was in the offing. I mean, they've said the same thing in their status report to the Supreme Court at the end of September, which came up for hearing in October. But since then, the order of 21st October that was given by the Supreme Court, they feel that the BCCI has not acted on that order. They feel that the President and Secretary are impediments. I've spoken to both Justice Lodha and Gopal Shankar Narayanan. In fact, let me also tell you that last Sunday, in fact, on the 12th of November, to be exact, there was a meeting of the Lodha panel, an informal meeting. They did not convene it formally. There was an informal meeting in Delhi in the evening where all panel members met. And they've also discussed whether they should give it up, because they are pretty frustrated and fed up as to what is happening in cricket. And unless the Supreme Court adheres to this on 5th of December and gives them a verdict, there is an opportunity. There's a serious chance, Ankit, that the Lodha panel, the 3 members of the Lodha panel, will even say that they want to resign. And they want to give it up because they do not want to continue to work in any form with Anurag Thakur and Ajay Shirke, because they've come to their wits' end.
That is a very big, a news break, in fact, Boria, that you are making on India Today right now, that the Lodha panel is completely fed up of the top brass of the BCCI, and they may even think of finding a way out of it, because their reforms have only been met with resistance as far as the top brass of the BCCI is concerned. Boria, also, if you can tell us, is there any reaction that we have picked up, initial reaction from the BCCI? How are they going to counter this?
No, they are watching closely. And in fact, let me also point out that yesterday, the Hyderabad Cricket Association has implemented the Lodha reforms in totality. Now, that gives Justice Lodha and his team a serious boost, because ahead of the Supreme Court hearing, if an important association like Hyderabad implements the reforms in totality, why is it that the other associations are holding back, and why is it that Anurag and Ajay are not, the BCCI top brass more specifically, are not being able to convince them? Is it a reaction of the Deloitte report that India Today broke? We don't know, but the fact is Hyderabad has done that. BCCI reaction, wait and watch, and we'll get ready before the next Supreme Court hearing on 5th. They very well know that Chief Justice Thakur will retire on 4th of January. They will want to prolong this hearing till then. Can they do that? We don't know. But there is a serious chance if 5th December, nothing tangible happens, i.e. removal of the BCCI top brass, facilitating implementation of reforms, you might well see, Ankit, that Justice Lodha, Justice Bhan and Justice Ravindran demit office.
Very big news break there. Boria, before I go to Shobit once again, I also quickly wanted to understand from you, you have been speaking to the Justice Lodha panel members as well. How did they come to this name of G.K. Pillai, former Home Secretary G.K. Pillai? What was the logic behind that?
They have been sort of trying to get a proper name, in fact, for a long time. In fact, from what I had originally understood, they were looking at 3 people. They were looking at possibly 1 cricketer, 1 established administrator, and a top bureaucrat. And that's how they zeroed in on this name. They feel he's a man of integrity and impeccable integrity. And they will also use, let me say that he will be the observer, but they will use people like Ratnakar Shetty, M.B. Sridhar, who are well entrenched in the BCCI administration and are paid officers of the board and have been doing very, very good jobs over the last many years. So Ratnakar Shetty, M.B. Sridhar and the administrative staff of the BCCI will be used by the Lodha panel. Their central grievance at this point in time is against the President and Secretary, who they feel are 2 serious impediments in the way of implementation of the Lodha reform.
Boria, stay on with me. Shobit, how is the cricketing world, the cricketers, former cricketers, how are they reacting to this? What do they believe about the Lodha panel and the reforms that they have recommended?
Well, each and every former cricketer you speak to, everyone is of the opinion that if it is an order passed by the apex court of the country, then the BCCI needs to accept those reforms. However, the board has certainly not done so. Now, today's development, what's important to note is that whether the Lodha panel or the reform panel sees the BCCI top brass as the hurdle as far as reforms are concerned, and this clearly shows that if the President Secretary are involved in the top brass that the Lodha panel is mentioning, then they are seeing the President Secretary as the biggest hurdles for cricket reforms in the country. Now, the interest of everyone, the Lodha panel, BCCI, cricket fans in the country, is that the sport should be run properly. However, in what was a dark day for Indian cricket, the BCCI top brass even suggested that due to these suggested reforms and restrictions put on BCCI and their accounts, the series, first of all against New Zealand and then against England, may not go ahead. So when it comes to cricket versus administration,
called it as an excuse that the BCCI was trying to use. Nikhil Chopra also on the phone line with us. Nikhil, our in-house cricket expert, how do you see this, Nikhil? I mean, you have worked under the former system, and now Justice Lodha coming out, the panel coming out with a very strong recommendation. The entire top brass needs to go.
Well, I think, Ankit, it was probably on the cards, because last time the Supreme Court says, fall in line, otherwise we will make you fall in line. And I think from BCCI's point of view, the recommendations that were done by the Lodha panel, they were saying that we cannot implement it because we are registered under the Tamil Nadu's Act and we're a society. For any recommendations or to make any changes, 3/4 of the committee members need to pass that, and all the state associations were not ready to do that. And in that, what happened was the Supreme Court had said that if no state association is ready to implement the Lodha panel, stop their funding. So I guess to make sure that the recommendations of the Lodha panel get implemented by the BCCI, that is why this step has been taken, so that all the Lodha recommendation is now implemented. Now the big question is, Ankit, very interesting.
Yeah.
What happens to the selection panel as well? Because you have the Lodha recommendation saying that the national selectors have got to be 3 in number and they've got to be test cricketers.
Okay.
Out of the 5 existing national selectors, 2 of the national selectors are not test players. Do they go then?
That's a very important question that you're raising. Let me take that to Boria. Boria, Nikhil is raising a very interesting point. What happens to selectors as well? I mean, it's not only the top brass. The entire functioning of the BCCI will, of course, change if this comes into effect. So what do you think will happen to the selectors? And also, if you can answer, how will it affect position of Anurag Thakur?
I have, in fact, asked the Lodha panel about the selectors, specifically about the question Nikhil raised, and the answer is they go. People like Jatin Paranjate and, out of the 5 members, 2 people have not played test match cricket. So Devang Gandhi stays, MSK Prasad stays, 3 people who have played test match cricket stay, the 2 others go. That's what the Lodha panel feels. It's a straight-cut answer. Anurag Thakur, in every sense is disqualified if the panel recommendations come into fruition. Anurag Thakur is disqualified from representing his own state because cumulative 9 years have been served. So from Himachal Pradesh, he'll have to give up. He will also have to give up his position of BCCI president. So in both ways, he's out of the BCCI and he's out of the state association, which partly explains the reason why the BCCI top management does not want to implement the reforms in totality. So what happens to him? If the reforms are implemented, Anurag Thakur will have to give way.
All right, Chetan Chauhan, former test cricketer, is also joining us on the phone line for more on this. Mr. Chauhan, how do you see these tough recommendations that the Lodha panel has put through? Boria was just telling us if the Supreme Court or if there is any hurdle to this as well, they might even think of giving up their position.
Okay, I was expecting this earlier because the confrontation and the defying had gone too long. And I think the BCCI or some of the officials of the BCCI have missed an opportunity to rectify things. Some of the points which were there, right from the beginning, the BCCI officials should have joined into those investigations or into the committee which was hearing. And I think some of the officials have done a wrong by not joining into the hearing, because what happened was people who were against the BCCI, their information and their words have been taken into account, and some of the good things done by the BCCI, they have been completely neglected. I'm of the opinion that BCCI is one of the best sports organizations working in this country. So, they have done tremendous amount of good to cricket.
Sir, at least as of now, the Supreme Court and the Lodha panel doesn't agree to that. But very quickly, sir, you have also, of course, you've been a prominent cricket administrator, especially in Delhi. What is the hurdle for, state associations to completely implement the Lodha panel reforms? Hyderabad has done it. Why can't others?
Well, see, at this stage, they have no choice. Each and every association will have to implement the Lodha committee. That opportunity, that's what I was saying some time back, that opportunity the BCCI and the other associations have missed out. Right from the beginning when the hearings were taking place, I think we should have joined in those hearings and, and things would have been much better. And instead of going into confrontation and instead of going into the defying mode, we should have joined the hearing and, put the point across as to what the BCCI wants, because ultimately the goal was the same. The BCCI wanted to clean the system, and so did the Lodha committee. So I would say it's a question of, it's a case of missed opportunities. And now I would say the associations or the BCCI, they have no choice. They have to implement it.
They have to implement it. They are left with no choice. Mr. Pradeep Magazine, senior sports journalist, is also joining us on the phone line. Mr. Magazine, very strong recommendations coming in there by the Lodha panel. Mr. Chauhan was saying that he looks at it as a missed opportunity by the BCCI. They have done good work, but possibly they could not explain it when the hearings were going on.
Well, I think this was expected. In fact, one expected this in earlier hearings too, where Justice Thakur's bench probably was wanting to give board more time to implement the recommendations. But even after giving them more time, I think Chetan Chauhan is right in saying that this is clearly not just missed opportunities, but a defiance of epic proportions, because what the board is doing is they are not agreeing to a court order. So now that this observer, I think that would mean that what Lodha has recommended, the Lodha panel has recommended, is appointment of him as the administrator of the board. So virtually, this means that the office bearers would become defunct.
Yes.
And I am sure that on December 3rd, when the hearing date is scheduled, the Justice Thakur's 3-member bench would, I think, implement this recommendation.
I'm completely out of time on this. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for speaking to us and giving us clarity on this big development as far as the world of cricket is concerned. With that, we're slipping to a very short break. Coming back with the headlines in just 2 minutes.